Yeah, I watched it. Blonde. So Blonde is a fictionalized telling of the life of Marilyn Monroe. We've all heard of Marilyn Monroe, one of the most famous icons of pop culture ever. This movie is based off of the novel of the same name. And like I said, it's not really a true biopic. I did some research on the subject. There are things that happened in this movie where I was like, that didn't happen. And in this film, we have Ana de Armas as Norma Jean Mortensen, aka Marilyn Monroe. I should also note that this film, which is streaming on Netflix by the way, is rated NC-17, which for those of you who might not know is the rating that is above R. Very, very rare these days. I think this is like the first NC-17 film in, over 10 years? And yeah, I will say, there's some subject matter that this movie touches on where I was like, yeah, I felt a little uncomfortable watching that. Granted, I'm sure that's what the director was going for, but still. It's all to prove a point, I guess. Now, I will say, Ana de Armas as Marilyn Monroe, I thought she was alright. Not the casting I would have initially gone with. I mean, really, if we're looking for a real Marilyn Monroe biopic, I would cast Margot Robbie. I think she'd be perfect. But Ana de Armas did a good job. She got the voice down pat. The way she had that kind of airy quality about her voice when she talked in interviews or on the screen, when she was on the screen ever. She had that meek damsel in distress kind of voice.
I guess I was discovered.
I read that de Armas actually trained with the vocal coach for like a year to get that voice down. It paid off. And for what this movie is, I felt that her portrayal of Norma Jean worked really well. And in this movie, we really see how much of a bummer her life supposedly was. Again, it's fictionalized, so I don't know how much of it was actually true. But I imagine there must be some truth to this. I'm sure the real Norma Jean's life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows all the time. I mean, she was married 3 times after all. This movie touches on 2 of those marriages. Her famous marriage to Joe DiMaggio, played in this movie by Bobby Cannavale. That was her second marriage. And then the movie touches on her 3rd marriage to Arthur Miller, the playwright, played in this movie by Adrian Brody. Haven't seen him in a while. And they both did a pretty good job. However, as good as the acting was, I can't say the movie itself was all that great, unfortunately. Yeah, this movie was a bit of a letdown, not just in tone. Although while I'm on the subject, yeah, this movie is a downer. Again, it kind of peels back the layers of the Marilyn Monroe that people saw on screen, and it portrays Norma Jean as just this miserable woman. I mean, she was seen as a sex symbol. People, she was like the sex symbol. She's the sex symbol to end all sex symbols. And so back in the 1950s when she was at her peak, you can imagine guys were just ogling her from across the room. To have all that attention all the time, yeah, that can't be fun. But at a certain point you're like, alright, I get it, her life sucked. And the movie feels like it's just raking you through the mud with her. Which again, I think is what the director was going for, but alright already. This is a long movie. It's 2 hours and 47 minutes long. Did it have to be? No. There were actually some points where I was like, that scene could have been cut out entirely. Wouldn't have changed anything. Like, there's a point in the movie where someone delivers a package to her house. And she's like, oh, I can't find my card. So the movie spends like 5 minutes, it felt like, having her search her house for her card. And then eventually she gets the package. I was like, why did we need to see her search for her card? I don't get it. Right there, could have cut that whole 5-minute part out of the movie. This movie also makes an artistic, stylistic choice by having it go from black and white to color and even messing with the aspect ratios. Most of the movie is 4:3 in black and white, and then sometimes it'll switch to 4:3 in color. But then some scenes are in like widescreen letterbox aspect ratio, and then sometimes they're in full screen 16:9. It goes all over the place, black and white, color, different aspect ratios. And I get that doing that sometimes will have some importance, but in this movie, I felt it just came off as weird. Like, why was this scene in full screen and in color? I don't get it. Like, why is it making those changes? I don't understand what the significance of that is. Usually I am able to figure that stuff out, but not this time. This time I just saw it as strange. And it did that a lot throughout the movie. My biggest problem with this movie, however, is that it's clearly disjointed. Every scene in the film felt like an isolated scene. Like here's one scene, here's the point of the scene, and then the next scene is like a completely different scenario. And I'm like, how did that previous scene lead into this? It didn't really. And there are no transitions in between the scenes, so it just felt really choppy. So it was just boom scene and boom scene for 2 hours and 47 minutes. And as the movie was going on and on about how shitty Marilyn Monroe's life was, I was just kind of sitting there like, yeah, alright, I get it. Life sucked for her. I'm getting tired. Yeah, I was starting to get kind of bored, honestly. Which is a bummer because, again, Marilyn Monroe, she is literally one of the most famous names in the entirety of the entertainment industry. Everyone knows who Marilyn Monroe was. I feel like she deserves a proper biopic. And this movie, based on a fictional account of her life, I felt that's not the way to go about it, especially after watching it. Again, I want to give props to Ana de Armas. She acts her ass off in this movie, seriously. She might be going for the Oscar in this one. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if she gets nominated. But I honestly wouldn't feel right calling this movie like the quintessential Marilyn Monroe movie. For a big name like that, I do feel like she deserves to be done justice. And I can't say this movie is it. Even the score was kind of strange. The score was this kind of ethereal sounding ambiance. And I was like, okay, what is this movie trying to accomplish with this music? Well, whatever it's trying to accomplish, it's not really landing. I don't know, guys. In the end, Blonde, I can't say I recommend watching it. Again, all the actors did a good job, but the movie felt disjointed. It was all over the place. It was way longer than it needed to be. The NC-17 rating may throw some people off. Like the subject matter, people will be like, oh yeah, that's just uncomfortable to watch. It gets graphic and sexual for sure. The movie's a downer. Like I said, you're sitting there going, yeah, I get it, her life sucked. And it's just drilling it into your head to the point where you're like, all right, enough already. Or at least that's how I felt. Again, I do want to stress that this account of her life is completely fictionalized. This is not really how her life really was. Or at least not for the most part. So take comfort in that. If this were a theatrical release, I would say wait until you can stream this movie online. I see how ironic that is, but do with that what you will. So Blonde, have you watched it? What are your thoughts on it? Am I being a dick? And if you're a fan of Marilyn Monroe, what's your favorite thing that she's done? I'll tell you, I remember watching her on Jack Benny on YouTube. I laughed my ass off at that, it was hilarious. But whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Now if you'll excuse me, there's a new episode of She-Hulk Attorney at Law premiering tonight. Hopefully this new episode will be better than the last episode. I did not like that one. But here's hoping for Daredevil tonight. Peace!